Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, back for another segment on our 283 amp, and you can see I've been zipping along on it. I've been recording some video segments along the way as I've been working on it, and this one is going to be on the first part of the electrical wiring. And I'm really trying to show you like the thought process behind why I lay out the wiring the way I do, and where I put the tag strips and why, and trying to keep the leads short and keeping signal things away from each other so we avoid any kind of nonsense like oscillations or hum or noise between different parts of the circuit. And it's really important you lay out an amp thinking that through. For example, somebody wanted me to build a 300B amp for them, but they wanted me to build it like some of those noisy China amps where you put the power transformer in the middle and the output transformers on each side of it with the tubes in front of them and the rectifier in the middle right next to the signal tubes. And I just said no. And they were like, well, I really want it built like that. And it's like, well, sorry, I'm not doing that. And if you don't want to buy the amp because it doesn't look the way you want it to, I've got to make it where it performs. And that's the main thing. Of course, I want it to look nice, but there is a reason why I build them like this. And I found it really works well. And like I said in the previous video, I feel like this is going to turn into a nice template to use for any kind of direct heated triode, or even a KT88 amp, of having the tubes laid out on the chassis like this. And I'm learning a few things with this prototype. Like, I probably would put the output tubes a little closer together in a future build so that those cathode resistors span across those tag strips better. And they don't really need to be this far apart. But again, when I get done with it, get the tubes all in it and everything, I'm going to take a look at it. If I like the way it looks, it's not detrimental to the performance to do this, so I may just keep doing them like this. And I like this larger form factor chassis for especially a direct heated amp that you've got to add some extra parts to. And so while it works well on my EL34 amp to have a little bit smaller chassis, I think for these direct heated triode amps, this larger 12x17 just seems to work better. And it will accept a wider range of output transformer sizes and types. So anyway, let's get looking at how I'm laying out the wiring and get this thing finished up. Okay, so we've got started on some of the layout here, and I've got a little jump start on the power supply that's over here on this side of the amplifier. And I'll zoom in there and get a little closer shot of that. But I wanted to just kind of show you the general layout of what I'm shooting for. And that wire can go down there because it's... So we're going to have a little tag strip down here that's going to have our filter capacitors for the main B+. And we're going to use these two little guys. We're going to sit down here and be the filter caps for the B+. And then we're going to have a remote ground point down here that ties up to our main star ground point. Got a rectifier tube here. Again, let me zoom in here and kind of show you how I wired this up. But you can see we've got the power switch. It's wired up with this snubber cap across the switch so it doesn't pop when you turn it on and off. And then it comes back here and connects the IC connector to the transformer. So we'll get into doing this little tag strip down here in the next video. This is our little switch here for the meter that we're going to be putting up here for measuring the cathode voltage. That's a little screen underneath where these resistors are, another screen or above it. And I'm going to put some tag strips along here that will pick up these two resistors and put them above or underneath this little screen so the heat from them can go up to the top. These are our 10-watt cathode resistors. Got these 10-turn potentiometers to use for our hum pots. And these are little 2-watt, 10-turn, 100-ohm pots. And these things aren't cheap, but it's nice having the fine-tuning of a 10-turn pot when you're adjusting the hum out of an AC heated, direct heated amplifier. And you can save a little money just putting some standard like 3/4 turn pots, but they're much harder to try to hit the sweet spot than these 10-turn ones are. So these are our 2.5 volt heaters, and they're going to come across to a tag strip I'm going to put right here, and then one of them is going to come over here to this pot and then down to the tube, and then the other one I'm going to run across here and then to the pot and down to the tube. I'm going to put the heaters on the outside, the heater pins, and then the AC heater, the 6.3 volt for the driver tubes, I'm going to run it down here and then across in the corner and then up here to the tubes. And that keeps that 6.3 volt high current or fairly high current heater voltage away from the signal path, which is going to be around here, because the RCA jacks are back here in this corner. And so that shielded wiring will come around, go to the volume pot, and then come over to the tubes. And then gonna put some tag strips along here to do the resistors and the connections between the tubes and the circuit. And I haven't decided yet. I may end up putting tag strips on both sides of these tubes and have them mounted there and there versus here and here. I'll just have to see how many connections I need to make. Could put some, one of those big long ones that goes between the two bolts. I haven't decided that yet. Again, I need to get some tag strips out and figure out where I want to put the bolts for the tube ring for the output tubes so that the tag strips for these cathode resistors end up in the right spot. And so still have to kind of lay that out. I need to get the output transformers installed and wire up the speaker jacks. They go across the back here. And so probably the next thing I'm going to do is get the output transformers final assembled and installed, since I painted the end caps or the end bells yesterday and they look nice, and was fighting with paint blushing a little bit, but they finally turned out nice once the sun came out. And yeah, that's kind of the idea, or the general idea of the layout. Oh, the last thing we have to do is, this is the center tap for the front end tubes and the 6.3, and it needs to be lifted to like positive 50 volts DC. And so for the tube ring for the rectifier tube, I'm going to put one of the bolts here and one of them there, so that we can put a tag strip right here, and then we can have the voltage divider with a little cap set up right here that'll pull off the B plus and creates the 80 volts DC we need to put on this wire, which is the center tap. So a little spot right there will be a good place to do that. And let me zoom in here and kind of show you what I've done with the power supply so far. Okay, so in the back here we have our IEC connector, and this upper terminal here is the fused one. And so it is going to go up here. This white wire comes up, goes up to our switch, and then it comes back and is spliced into this white wire here that goes into the transformer. And then the black wire comes out and connects to this hot terminal on the IEC connector. And here we have our little green ground wire that comes over to the lug that's attached to the chassis. It's a little hard to see because I've put that liquid electrical tape over all these 120 volt terminals to insulate them. Okay, so we got the power on both sides of the primary of our power transformer, and here are the myriad of other wires that come out of the secondary. And this red wire right here is the center tap of the high voltage AC, and it's connected to our star ground point right here. We also have this little wire here, which is the electrostatic shield of the transformer, and I've got it also connected to the star ground point, as well as the ground for this 22 UF Solene film cap, which is our first cap in the power supply. These yellow wires come around here and go up to our 5 volt heaters on the rectifier tube. The red wires here are the high voltage AC that also come around from the transformer and connect here and here. Now, one thing I kind of goofed up here, it's not the end of the world. I rotated this tube socket a little bit so that pin 8 is here, which is the output of the rectifier tube. And normally I have it here. And when I was putting this together, I didn't have this cap sitting here. And I was like, well, this will lay out a little nicer if I turn this tube sideways. But now I remember why I don't. Because the leads on this cap aren't far enough to reach from here to there. And so if I was doing this, or if you're doing this, rotate the tube socket and make this pin 8. And that way the leads on this cap are long enough to reach, and you don't have to splice in a little extra wire here to get to the star ground point. Like I said, not the end of the world. It's not going to really impact anything. It'll just look a little neater, and it's easy enough to make this wire just a little longer and have it wrap around. But yeah, when I was first laying this out, I'd forgotten the reason that I don't normally orient them this way. And then this is our 6.3 volt heaters, and they connect here and here. So that's where we're at right now with the power supply wiring. And let me go ahead and get the rest of the power supply wired up and get some of these other components mounted up, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so we got a little more of our amp wired up. First thing, let's go over what we've got going on right here. I ended up putting the screws for the trim ring on this rectifier tube here and here so that we could put this tag strip right here. And it's a 5 terminal. We lopped off 1 terminal on the end, so I guess it's a 4 terminal now. So this is going to be our B+. We've got the voltage comes off the rectifier tube, comes to the choke, comes up to this terminal here, goes to this 47 UF 450 volt cap. Then it goes through this 50 ohm resistor that's got some double stick thermal tape holding it down, along with these heavy solid copper wires out of some Romex, and I believe it's 14 gauge solid copper. So that gives it a little, reinforcement along with this double stick thermal tape to hold this in place. And they're soldered into the lower terminals of this tag strip here. So this is going to be our B+ output. We're eventually going to put this 100 UF 450 volt cap right there, somewhere along in that area. But we're going to leave that off till we get the rest of our wiring done on this little tag strip. That'll be the last thing we solder in there. So this positive 320 volts comes up to this terminal here. And then we have a 330K resistor that goes across from there to this terminal here. Then we have 100K that goes from here to here, which is the ground. That's what this terminal is. And then this comes over here to our ground. And eventually this is going to get connected to our star ground point. And then here, anywhere above like 10 UF is fine. And I think this is a 47 UF. Needs to be about 160 volts is a good place for this to be. And again, anything from like 10 to 100 UF, it's not very critical. I just had this in my bin box. And then this right here is the center tap for our 6.3 volt heaters. And what we're doing with all of this mess is we're elevating the center tap of our 6.3 volt heaters to 75 volts or somewhere close to that. And the reason we're doing that is the front end tubes have approximately 150 volts on the cathode of the upper section of the SRPP, and the maximum rating for a 6SL7 is 90 volts. And so we're trying to split the difference between 150 volts and the 0 volts of the lower section. And that's what this little voltage divider is doing for us. Also, the other function this will provide, this will act as our bleeder resistor for these power caps down here, so that when you shut the amp off, it'll bleed off the high voltage sitting on the positive side of this cap and the one next to it, and it'll come up through here, go through these two resistors and the ground. So in this amp, we don't need to add an extra bleeder resistor, which is a nice bonus. So like I was saying earlier, this is going to end up eventually being tied up to this tag strip back here, which is our star ground point, and we're going to run just a ground wire that'll come up, across, and down to this point right here, and this is our remote ground for the power supply and also for the front end tubes. We're also going to eventually run a wire from here in a similar fashion, come up and across into this terminal here on our little resistor tag strips. And then you can see this wire under here is connecting this terminal to that terminal. So we've brought our 2.5 volt heaters over here, and they're basically floating. We're not connecting the center tap of those to anything. And then these come over here and they go across this 100 ohm potentiometer, and then the center tap or the center wiper of this potentiometer is what we pull the signal off of this output tube. And you can see they connect here, and then they come over here to the heaters of this tube, and then the signal comes from here to the wiper and then to the cathode resistor, and then on this side it'll go through the cathode resistor into ground. Same thing over here, got the heaters, daisy chain between the 100 ohm potentiometer, and then comes over to the tube. Then the wiper of this pot is where the cathode signal's pulled off, and it comes over here to this cathode resistor, goes across it and to ground back through this wire. And then this will be connected to our star ground point. And then we're going to be putting the 100 UF cathode bypass cap from here to here. And then on this end, we'll be connecting it from here to here. So that all lays out really nice. This is going to be where our B plus connects for our output transformers. So we'll be running a wire from here that kind of goes up and over and then down, connects to here, and then one output transformer is connected to this. This little wire here goes between these two tag strips, and this is the other positive for the output transformer. I suppose you could have just left this long and connected over there. I don't know. I just think that looks neat and kind of symmetrical to hook it up like that. And then these blue wires here are the plates of the output tubes, and that'll be one of the last things we connect. So all we've got left after we do the final little bit of this wiring, there's not a lot left to do here. We've got to deal with the front end tube, and I've already started kind of wiring some of this up. And let me see if I can zoom in here and get a better shot at this. So I think I'm going to put the tube ring holes for these 6SL7 tubes diagonally, put one there, And we can put a tag strip right there. And then we can put another one back here like this. And then this one will be for the input signal. And like this one's the one that holds the tag strip down, so we're not going to be using it. And then this will be the positive signal, and that's the ground. And then this will go from here to the grid with just a piece of wire. And then if we were ever playing around with this and we needed to put a grid stopper, we could put it between those two terminals too, which is handy. And then this will be connected to the ground terminal on this tag strip to tie them together. And then this will come over to the main ground point. So this is going to be where the cathode resistor and that stuff connects to this strip from this tube. And so we can put the cathode resistor between here and here, and then put the cap across that and make this our ground point, which then we tie into over here. Then the next thing we need to hook up is going to be the positive or the power to the plate of this tube. And we can bring the B plus over here. We can put our dropping resistor from here to here. And again, we'll fold this over and not use this terminal since it's attached to the chassis. So we have a resistor between here and here, a dropping resistor. And then this can go to the plate. And then this terminal here can come up to this terminal on the end here, which will be the output of this SRPP that will go to the grid of the output tube, which is over here. And then for the output tube, we can put a tag strip on that bolt, so we can run a ground from here to one of these two terminals. Let's say we use this one. We can put the grid leak resistor between these two, the 470K, and then the coupling cap would come from the front end tube plate up to this terminal, which would be this guy down here on the end. We put our coupling cap between here and here, and then this goes to the grid of the output tube. So I think that's a nice way to get all this laid out. So the next thing I'm going to do is get these holes drilled for this front tube ring, get these tag strips nailed down, get the heater run. Again, it's going to come from this tube across up to this tube, and it's going to come across there and then come up and over to our 6.3 volt wiring up here. And that'll get the heaters for the front end tubes done. And then, yeah, I'll show you how I'm going to like jumper the B plus over here in the ground, and I got to figure all that out. But first I got to get all the tag strips mounted, but I think I figured out like how many tag strips I need or how many terminals I need, and to have them close to the tube socket holes so that we have as short a wiring as possible, especially on this high gain wiring here on this front end tube. Do not want to create a situation where we have oscillation or something, and that's all related to how the wiring is laid out and keeping all the leads as short and as direct as possible, which is what we're going to do. So this looks like a great place to wrap up this segment. Well, as you can see, we're over halfway done with this amp, and we're actually getting the wiring fairly close to being able to power this thing up. I still need to wire up the front end tubes and finish up the wiring on the output tubes and stuff. I did get the tube rings installed after the last segment and got the tag strips all installed, so I'm ready to start running all the wiring to the front end, getting the grounds running and stuff. So hopefully in maybe another day of work, maybe two, I'll have this thing ready to power up. And just to give you an idea how long this stuff takes, I've spent 2 solid days working on the wiring up to this point. And now that does include me like having to figure out where I want to put stuff and, stopping and looking at it and just, figuring all that out. Doing the next one probably wouldn't take as long, especially if I got, pictures of this one to look at to know where I want to run the wires because I know it worked. But it is a time-consuming thing. So don't think you're going to build one of these things in like 2 days. That's just not going to happen. And part of the fun of this is that I enjoy doing this. And this is fun building this stuff to me. And honestly, if you don't enjoy doing this, you're probably going to rush through it because you don't like, you're not having fun, and you're going to make a mistake, or you're going to do something wrong. It's not going to turn out good. Then you're going to get even more frustrated, and you probably just should go buy your audio gear. Again, I know some folks DIY just for the money savings, and I do it because I really enjoy just doing this kind of work, and it's very relaxing and cathartic, or whatever words you want to come up with. It's something I really enjoy, and I hope that comes through on the camera, that I'm really having fun doing this. And there's some things that do get a little frustrating, and I'm learning to just put those things aside and go work on something that I'm going to have fun doing. But I think that's part of this too, is learning as you go along. And so hopefully this little 283 is going to turn out nice. Anyway, if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters, folks that make donations at my website. Really appreciate that. I appreciate folks that are joining the YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. It just really goes a long way to making it where I can afford to do this stuff. I just spent $4,000 buying parts, transformers, chassis, and stuff to build feature amplifiers for the channel and for customers. So yeah, it's an investment, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you are too. So until the next video, have a nice day.